They killed Julius Caesar to save the Roman Republic. The plan sounded almost heroic: remove the dictator, return power to the Senate, restore liberty. There was only one problem. After 23 stab wounds, the Republic did not come back to life. It began dying even faster. The strangest part is that the conspirators achieved almost everything they wanted on the morning of March 15, 44 BC. Caesar was dead. Their main enemy was gone. They had knives in their hands, slogans about freedom, and approximately zero solid plan for what to do the next day, and that is where the disaster began. The first decision that pushed Rome toward this point was made by Caesar himself. After years of civil war, he defeated his rivals and concentrated in his own hands a level of power the Republic had almost never known. In February of 44 BC, he received the title Dictator Perpetuo, dictator without a defined end date. To a modern person, the word dictator already sounds like an alarm. To a Roman senator, another possibility sounded even worse: king. For centuries, Romans had been proud that their ancestors had driven out their kings. Rule by one man was a political nightmare used to frighten generations, and now Caesar sat on a golden chair, accepted unprecedented honors, and more aristocrats began to see this not as temporary emergency power, but as a rehearsal for monarchy. Caesar himself publicly refused a diadem when Mark Antony offered it to him during the festival of Lupercalia. The crowd applauded the refusal. That should have reassured the senators. It did not, because the problem was no longer the crown. The problem was that many members of the Roman elite no longer believed Caesar would ever willingly restore the old rules of the game. That created the second decision. If they could not restore the system through politics, they would restore it with knives. Dozens of senators joined the conspiracy. Among the key organizers were Marcus Junius Brutus, Gaius Cassius Longinus, and Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus. For them, this was not supposed to be an ordinary murder, but a political act. They wanted to show that this was not one man taking revenge. This was the Republic removing a tyrant, and here we can already see the first crack in the plan. They thought very carefully about how to kill Caesar. They thought far less carefully about what to do with Rome after Caesar was gone. On March 15th, Caesar initially hesitated about whether to attend the Senate meeting at all. He was feeling unwell. His wife Calpurnia had been frightened by a disturbing dream. Ancient writers add an entire collection of bad omens to the story, so many that any screenwriter would probably say, okay, that's a bit much. But the most important warning was not mystical. It was a real person. Decimus Brutus, one of the conspirators and also a man Caesar trusted, came to him and persuaded him not to disappoint the senators who were waiting. Caesar went. On the way, he was even handed a note warning him about the conspiracy. According to the ancient account, he placed it with his other papers, intending to read it later. History does not always turn on the lack of an army. Sometimes it turns on a few minutes and the habit of reading your messages immediately. Inside the Curia of Pompey, the conspirators surrounded Caesar under the pretense of presenting a request. Tullius Cimber approached him with a petition, then grabbed his toga. That was the signal. The attack began. Caesar was stabbed approximately 23 times. Later retellings transformed the scene into an almost theatrical moment with the perfect line, "Et tu, Brute." But the sources do not allow us to be that confident. Some ancient traditions say he said nothing. Others preserve possible words in Greek. The famous Latin phrase is above all a literary legacy, not a reliable transcript from the crime scene. But the conspirators had no time to think about future plays. Caesar was dead. Now they had to prove that the killing really had saved the Republic. This is where the third fatal decision appears. They failed to create a hard, clear mechanism for transferring power. They did not destroy Caesar's political network. They did not control the emotions of the city. They did not eliminate Mark Antony. They did not have a single candidate ready to take control of the state. They did not have a prepared system capable of convincing the army, the plebs, and the provinces that tomorrow would be stable. Instead, they went up to the Capitoline Hill and proclaimed liberty. On paper, beautiful. In real Rome, the beginning of panic. Because Caesar was not simply a man feared by senators, he had support among a significant part of the ordinary population and among veterans. His reforms, land distributions, political generosity, and image as a victorious general had created loyalty that could not simply be cut away with a knife. The conspirators expected Rome to see them as liberators. Instead, they discovered that many Romans saw them as murderers. The Senate tried to find a compromise. The assassins were granted amnesty, but Caesar's acts and appointments were left in force. The arrangement itself was almost comically unstable. The dictator was supposedly a tyrant, his killers were forgiven, but the tyrant's decisions remained valid. Then came the funeral. Mark Antony was given a stage the conspirators should never have allowed him to have. Caesar's public funeral turned a political crisis into an emotional one. Antony spoke about the dead dictator's achievements, and Caesar's will added another problem. His heir was the young Gaius Octavius, the future Octavian. Suddenly, Caesar, who no longer existed, had a political successor, and at that point the plan, kill one man, save the system, began to look especially bad. Rome descended into another struggle. Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate. Proscriptions, executions, confiscations, new armies. The freedom promised by the conspirators very quickly began to look like yet another civil war. In 42 BC, Brutus and Cassius met the forces of Antony and Octavian near Philippi. They lost. Both died after the defeat. The men who killed Caesar to prevent one-man rule had effectively removed the single figure who had temporarily held the victorious coalition together and opened a fight over his legacy. Even after Philippi, peace did not come. Octavian and Antony eventually turned their weapons against each other. In 31 BC, Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra at Actium, and in 27 BC he received the name Augustus and became the central figure of a new political order. Republican institutions did not formally disappear overnight. The Senate continued to exist. Offices remained. The old words remained. But the real center of power had changed, and that is the central irony of the Ides of March. Brutus, Cassius, and their allies feared that one man would become so powerful that the Republic would never be able to turn back, so they killed that man. Then they created a chaos in which Rome wanted exactly what they had feared most: stability around one victorious leader. Caesar could be authoritarian, ambitious, and dangerous to the old Republican order. His killers had real political reasons to fear him, but their greatest mistake was not that they misunderstood Caesar, they misunderstood Rome. They believed that removing the dictator would automatically restore the Republic. It turned out that systems do not work that way. On March 15th, 44 BC, the conspirators won their assassination. Caesar was dead, but in that same room they lost their political objective. They raised their knives to save the Republic and help create a world in which Rome would soon be ruled by an emperor.